Welcome. My name is Zan Ta with Repro Products in Smyrna, Georgia. Today's presentation is on Autodesk Revit Server. This will be a quick introduction on what it is, how does it function, how does it work. This is actually a re-record of a session that I did quite a while ago, and this is a request based upon the previous recording that I did. There was some background noise and some issues, so we're going to re-record this session. So our agenda will focus in on who is Repro Products and our company offerings. We'll actually then get into what is Autodesk Revit Server. We'll go into what it is, why do we have it, how does it work, what are the system requirements, and the pros and cons. And then we'll finish off with a call to action. So Repro Products as a company has been around for well over 35 years. We are diversified. We are resellers for Xerox, Canon, OSE, Faro, KIP, HP, Bluebeam, and obviously Autodesk. We have multiple divisions in the company. So we have a full printing production environment downstairs. We handle all the physical printing of all the AEC industry construction document paperwork. We have a digital plan room. We also have another division that's the Autodesk Gold Partner reseller division, where we sell and support Autodesk products such as AutoCAD, Revit, Navisworks, Revit Server, so on and so forth. We have another division that's the 3D reality capture division, and that mainly focuses in on Faro laser scanning devices. And we provide the services necessary to head out to the job site, scan it, bring it back to the office, stitch everything together, and create a point cloud file for your use within your company workflow. That's a small sampling of who we are as Repro Products. We also have a sister company called the Color Spot that is up in Marietta, Georgia, and their focus is on digital graphics, signage, wayfaring, vehicle wraps, things like that. So if you are local, then if you have a chance, come stop by the office and ask to tour it, and anybody can stop what they're doing and help you out. So what is Revit Server? Revit Server basically is a tool that allows you to use the work sharing capabilities of Revit on a wide area network basis. So for those of you who are not familiar with work sharing in Revit, it basically just means allowing multiple people to work on multiple models all at the same time, synchronizing with a single central model. That work sharing philosophy and tool within Revit is really initially built upon the local area network connection type of methodology. So it's in a single office environment. But what happens if you have multiple offices? You have an office in Boston, you have one in London, you have one in Shanghai, and they all need, all the end users in all those offices need to work with a central model across the continent. So in that case, you need to introduce either Revit Server or even a 360 collaboration for Revit. This video obviously is focusing on Revit Server, so we'll look at the pros and cons when we get to that section. So why do we use it? And like I said earlier, it allows for a multi-office company to use Revit and work sharing capability to collaborate with the central Revit model in all of their different office locations. This is dictated upon certain requirements, and we'll cover those in a little bit. How does it work? When we install Revit Server, you're actually installing it as a multiple type of role server situation. You can either have a host, an accelerator, an admin, or any combination of the three. The host Revit server is the actual master central model server that holds the master server Revit model. The accelerator for the Revit server is another Revit server that's actually acting as like a backup domain controller, if you will. It replicates the central server Revit model data across to any accelerator, and the changed data from the master central model to the accelerator is updated every 2 minutes. You have a role as admin, and this allows the Revit server to be able to be accessed via an HTML interface, and we'll look at this when we get into the software. The roles themselves are created via an environment variable, which is in English, and that environment variable can be tagged again as either host, accelerator, admin, or a combination of the three. So how does it work for the end user? So as an end user, when you're working in a model, Revit model, that is a local copy of a central model, whenever you make a save that's local, it just saves your data like you normally do. If you hit save to central, what happens is the changed data goes from your workstation directly to the master central model, wherever that is sitting in the company-wide area network. Any new updated information that you do not have in your local model is actually not coming from that master central model. It is coming from the closest local Revit server accelerator that you happen to be next to. And the reason they do this is for distance, speed, and the ability to get your data faster. That information, the changed information from the central model to all the Revit server accelerators, are replicating and synchronizing themselves every 2 minutes. So at any point in time a local user decides to hit save to central, his changed data is coming from a local, near proximity-wise Revit server accelerator. When we get into the actual Revit software, you'll have different interfaces that you can have access to. For example, in the open dialog box, you'll actually have a little link on the left-hand vertical navigation for Revit Server. Within the Collaborate tab of the ribbon in the Revit software, you'll have the Manage Connection for Revit Server Accelerator as well. And then, like we said earlier, you'll have the environment variable that is set up on the server side and the workstation side. This is a little quick image on the Autodesk Revit Server Administrator admin, if you will, role and the HTML interface. It gives you access to looking at the name of the Revit server, any folders that have been created inside, and any Revit central models that are contained in any one of those folders. You can create new folders, you can delete content, you can cut, copy, and paste content, and you can lock the model down for replication purposes. There are system requirements for Autodesk Revit Server, and this is showing actually just for Revit Server 2016. 2017 just came out about a month or so ago, end of April. So if you get a chance, make sure you look at the system requirements for the newer version of Revit Server 2017 if you are deploying that. Now remember, Revit is version specific, so guess what? Revit Server is also version specific, as well as A360 collaboration for Revit. So if you are in a company that has multiple Revit projects running and they happen to be in 13, 14, and 15 and 16 versions, guess what? You have to have Revit Server for each one, each version. There are obviously a lot of pros and cons to having Revit Server, and the pros obviously are saving, caching the data is saving and not the entire model. You do have central model replication redundancy, so if the master central model does get destroyed or corrupted somehow, it's very easy to take a Revit Server accelerator that has a copy of that central model and promote it to be the primary domain controller, if you will. Obviously, you can have access to any of those local Revit Server accelerator models. And a big negative, obviously, is it's set up to be for a single domain use only. So if you have an office that has 5 different physical locations, but it's still under the same domain, say for example www.acme.com, then you're fine. However, if you need to work with other people and other companies that have a different domain, you have to do some finagling, okay? And you can actually do it. I have a little bit of verbiage text up here that describes what you'll need to do if that's the case and you still want to use Revit Server. It isn't the ideal thing to do, but it works. And the reality is, if you are working with this type of work sharing wide area network concept and you need to interface with other people that are outside of your domain, for example, you're the architect and you have to work with the MEP engineers or structural engineers or any consultants, you really need to start looking at A360 collaboration for Revit. Another negative is you can't create a local file using Windows Explorer. You have to actually use the admin dialog box. A lot of people are used to using Workshare Monitor tool that you can download and install under subscription to help you with monitoring who's got what Revit model open, what work set, things like that. Workshare Monitor does not function with Revit Server. Okay. Working at risk is not feasible. Working at risk by default isn't something you want to do anyway. You do not have right-click capability in the open dialog box for the Revit Server. And obviously all the folder management and file management for Revit Server needs to be performed within the Revit Server admin page. You cannot overwrite the central model with the same name. And then obviously backing up the central model takes some doing. And so lastly, if you have any hiccups or questions or like further information, just contact Repro Products and ask for me or ask for your account rep. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and jump into the Autodesk software so you can physically see what's going on. So here I am in Revit Server 2016. Now, this is actually a virtual machine session up and running on my laptop. It's actually running Windows Server 2008 R2. So if I look at the properties of the computer, you'll see it is Windows Server 2008 R2. And so obviously when you're installing Revit Server, it needs to be on a server class operating system. Once it's installed, you can head over to the home page, which really is nothing more than the name of the server that you're working with initially, and then drilling down to that particular service, which is Revit Server Admin, and then whatever version 2014, 15, 16. When you do this and it's configured and installed properly, you'll get to this Autodesk Revit Server Administrator page. In here, it lists the ability for you to create new files and create new folders, delete objects, cut, copy, paste objects, lock down a Revit model. If you look at the server top level and you have it highlighted, it gives you the names of the name of the server, the roles, when was it last updated, when was it created, how many files and folders, things like that. If you drill down to a subfolder, it'll give you basic information about that subfolder as well. And if you select an actual particular Revit central model, you can start to see things like the submission history, the versioning, who did it, when did they do it, and the file size. So from a Revit Server admin console side, this is all there is to it. It's very simple. There's nothing else going on fancy-wise with it. I'm going to switch over to another virtual session. And now this is a virtual session of Windows 7 Pro with Building Design Suite Ultimate 2016 installed, and Revit is already installed on here. If you head over to the Collaborate tab of the ribbon, you'll see under Synchronize panel, if you expand it, you can get to Manage Connection for Revit Server Accelerator. In here, it will tell you, hey, your Revit software is connected to an accelerator because I already have it up and running, and that's the name of the physical server, and it is connected to that server. When you are looking at working in this capacity with Revit Server, if you click Open, if you scroll down to the left-hand side, you'll see Revit Server. Clicking it will give you access to any Revit server that it can see, that this computer can see on its network. And if you double-click it, you can get into any of the subfolders, and within any of those subfolders, you can see that particular file. That's the central model. Now, because it is a central model, you'll notice Create New Local is checked by default, and if I click Open, it's going to create a brand new local model copy of the central model, and it's synchronizing that data back and forth with the central model that's on Revit Server. The workflow and how you use it is exactly the same as if you're in a local area network versus a wide area network methodology. Saving and saving to central is exactly the same thing. Okay. And depending on how big the model is and how much data there is, when it initially creates a local model, will dictate how long it takes to open up this file. Again, here's the save. This save is just saving your content locally. Save to central. If you look very carefully in the path, now it says RSN. That's Revit Server. And the name of the server computer and the name of the folder and the name of the central model. And when I click OK, I'm saving back to central. Remember, with any kind of Revit workflow, when you're dealing with work sharing, when you close the files, make sure that you are saving and synchronizing and saving locally as a secondary, just in case any changed data from the central model is pushed to your local model, and always relinquish control. That's it really in regards to the Revit server and how it functions and what it does. Thank you very much for watching the presentation, and I hope this helps for those who needed a little bit more clarification since the last video recording. And if you need any questions answered or you need any further assistance, just contact Repro Products and ask for Zahn, or ask for any of your account reps. Thank you.